Shabbat Shalom. Towards the end of Parashat Beshalach, which we read last week, we learned that God presented Israel with instruction at Marah. There, God gave them a statute and an ordinance. Chok u'mishpat. Chok u'mishpat, the Hebrew term for statute and ordinance, can also be rendered as law and justice, and points towards the legal and ethical nature of this instruction. Still, given that the written Torah does not offer any further information about the revelation at Marah, the content of these laws remain unknowable or enigmatic in the text itself. Following Midrash, Rashi argues that God's command at Marah was simply an early iteration of sections that were revealed later on in Sinai. Rashi writes, "At Marah, God gave them a few sections of the Torah in order that they might engage in the study thereof. The sections containing the command regarding the Sabbath, the red heifer, and the administration of justice." Ramban challenges Rashi's approach by arguing that if the Torah was teaching actual mitzvot, such as Shabbat or the red heifer, as it does elsewhere in the Torah, why then would the Torah conceal the content of these very mitzvot? Ramban then goes on to affirm the literal meaning of the verse itself, explaining that at Marah, God instructed Israel with matters pertaining to universal laws of ethics and justice, chok u'mishpat, quite literally. For Ramban, these include, and I quote, rules that they should live by, to love one another, and to behave in accordance with the advice of the elders, and to act with modesty in their tents, and relate peaceably with those who enter their camp, and ethical exhortations, all of which are not the statute of the Torah, but practices for the well-being of the states. Ramban's reading of the episode at Marah powerfully situates the rabbinic maxim, derech eretz kadma leTorah, that natural morality preceded the giving of Torah in the Torah itself. According to this reading of Parashat Beshalach, leading into Parashat Yitro, the children of Israel had to embrace universal morality before accepting God's unique instruction to Israel through the Torah. The acceptance of universal ethics for Ramban becomes foundational for the particularistic revelation of Sinai. Reb Chaim David HaLevi, a rabbinic giant who served as the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv from 1973 until his death in 1998, teaches that the very structures and form of a legal system were also set prior to the giving of Torah itself, and that these two are universal in nature. He writes, historical reality has proven the wisdom of the nations, be it through the establishment of suitable modes of governance, the founding of mighty superpowers, the discovery and settlement of parts of the world, the development of wondrous scientific systems. Perhaps this has already been alluded to in naming a Torah portion after Yitro, as a way of teaching that we can learn from the enlightened nations the external means necessary for the inner content of the Torah. Justice and law are contained in the Torah. However, the external, formal procedures of the law system, the different levels of courts and due procedures, these can be learned from nations blessed with wisdom. End quote. In both Israel and America, religious commitments, sadly, often lead to division and tension. The Ramban's commentary and the aspirational worldview found in Rav Chaim David HaLevi's own commentary can serve as important reminders about the possibility for shared universal ethics and the importance of a single system of law governing civil life. God's revelation at Sinai is rooted in God's instruction at Marah, and our commitment to morality must form the basis to our devotion to Torah.